when you click on this, you will have access to videos that explains it. They're quick videos, like 2-minute videos, graphic organizers, and any directions you would need to implement these strategies. All right. We will briefly focus on discourse, or what I like to call good noise in the classroom. So to get us started, I would like for everyone to create their own analogy about classroom discourse. So think about your own experiences with discourse in your classroom. Now you can choose one of the following things that you see on the slide, or you can choose your own. However, you have an outdoor festival, an opera, and a jazz quartet. So using the STEM that you see also is on your participant guide. Discourse in my classroom is like because. Give you about 30 seconds to think of what you're going to share. Hey, I hear somebody typing away. Are we ready to share? Okay, Mr. Fan?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Uh, Discourse in my classroom is like a heavy metal concert because it might sound chaotic, but there's beautiful meaning and music being created.
I love that. Thank you. Someone else?
I'll go next. Discourse in my classroom is like an outdoor festival because every class period and every table group is different. I have my group of kids that are more calm, cool, and collected. And then I have my kids that are overly excited about history and like to argue with each other. And then I have my kids that are a little quiet. They like to kind of hang out, sit, and lay in the grass. And then some that like to be front and center, front row, and asking me a million questions. So I would say outdoor festival is the best analogy for my room.
Thank you. Love that. Let me hear from 2 more, and then we'll move on.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I said, discourse in my classroom is like an opera because it sounds like my students are singing when it comes to like answering questions, and when we're engaged in conversation, they're talking to me. Sometimes it might be quiet, sometimes it might be loud.
Okay, thank you. One more.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
Oh, okay. I would say discourse in my classroom is kind of like a game night. Some moments you have your loud moments, and some you have your, times where nobody knows what's, not going on, but like can't figure the answer. So it's just like very up and down, like a game night.
I love that. Thank y'all for sharing. And it's wonderful to hear that your kids are definitely talking. That's a good thing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you're just joining me, once again, I put the participant guide in the chat. Okay, on your participant guide, for the next 5 minutes, I'm going to ask that you read this one pager and keep the following question in mind. In your opinion, which is most significant? What is the most significant benefit for students, and why? And we're still talking about good noise. We're talking about discourse in the classroom. We're going to use QSSA. As previously mentioned, it is what is being promoted for Q2. It's one of the 4 strategies that we're going to be using. And so we're going to model it today using the reading. And so your prompt is the most significant benefit of classroom discourse is because. So the way, how many of you have used QSSA? Because it's in my lessons. This is some of the lessons that's provided in grade 8. So it's a great way to get pairs of students talking. So we're going to try it today. So the question is, which is the most significant benefit of classroom discourse, and tell us why. Your signal is when you have your STEM, when you're ready to respond, you're going to give me a thumbs up. In your classroom, your students could put their hand on their head, they could stand, they could put their pencils down, and then you're going to provide them a STEM. Then they're going to share with a partner, and then you would, to access what was being said in the room, you call on 3 or more to share. Now, for our sake today, we will not be able to necessarily share with a partner, but I will call on 3 of you to share your responses. So, are you ready? The most significant benefit of classroom discourse is because. Miss Barraza.
Okay, so mine is the most significant benefit of classroom discourse is connection and belonging, building a classroom community. Because they need to feel that you care about them so that they can give back, because the talking, the engagement, they engage on everything else but history. And a lot of them do not hear really what's going on the outside world. I try and make connections of what I hear is happening in the news to what we're studying about, and there's nothing there. So I've been trying to connect with them by having them feel like they belong in my class.
Thank you. What about Miss Hawkins? No, Miss Hawkins?
Well, I just heard what
There
she
you go.
said. I just heard what she said, and I kind of feel the same way too. I try to connect things, what we learn into the real world. Like, for instance, I asked another day about the Quartering Act. Would y'all like somebody sitting in your house, a stranger, and you have to feed them and take care of them? So I try to put stuff back, make questions like that or ask them questions like that to see what their response would be. Because, sometimes they say some pretty funny things. So
Okay.
so I try to connect, that way, and also into their world too. Not because where I work at is it's 99% Hispanic. So I try to think of things that they connect to, with their culture
Okay.
along with the social studies.
Now, do y'all provide set of STEMs and word banks and things like that to assist our EBs and SPED students?
Yes, yes, we do. We do center stems, you know, we do those with them. And I, kind of show them how you make a question back into a center stem too.
Exactly. One other person, y'all want to share?
I can go. I think the most significant benefit of classroom discourse is retention, because I think one thing that these kids really need is just the ability to actually retain retain knowledge. The basis of critical thinking is having something to compare your present situation to. And with a lot of kids, I think it just flows away from them too quickly for them to then actually really think critically and compare.
You said a mouthful when you said retain. And when our students get the opportunity to talk and write, they are strengthening their retention skills. So just a few questions to debrief. How might QSSSA support your striving learners? This is something you can do real quick at the beginning of class, end of class. So how do you think this strategy could help those striving learners? Sabrina?
Did you say Sabrina?
I did, Miss Green.
Oh, okay. I think that this course can definitely help thriving learners because it allows them to push their thinking to the next level. It allows them to clarify what it is that they think they know, and then it also can help them clarify misconceptions for the kids around them who thought they knew but they didn't. And 95% of what we teach, we remember.
And if you use this strategy correctly, you're going to get 100% participation because everyone has to share with a partner, and then you can call on a few students to see what was in the room. And like we said earlier, giving students the opportunity to speak in a complete sentence because we're providing them a sentence stem. And a lot of them don't have that skill. So when we can help them speak in complete sentences, they will write in complete sentences, which will get us support toward that SCR that we're going to talk about in just a second as well. We kind of mentioned what part of the lesson this might work well in. The hook, an exit ticket, maybe even your checks for understanding. And then lastly, we used reading and to support our QSSSA. What could you use in your classroom? What else could you use? You could always use a reading, but what else could you use?
Images?
Sorry.
Images,
Oh, sorry.
yes.
Images, anchor chart.
Images, anchor charts, poetry, a quote, definitely. Okay, here's some quick tips and tricks when you're using QSSSA. Always use an open-ended question. Let the students write down their responses. Again, they're going to speak and they're going to write. We're going to create some dynamic students here. Wait 100% every time. Make sure everybody is ready to respond, and then add response stems if you want to extend the conversation before moving on. So thank you for participating. Let's get started with our one and only learning objective. Let's look at historical STAR data and how we can use it to influence instructional practices. So let's recap quarter one. They came, they claimed, they stayed. Then they became a country. Now in quarter two, once becoming a country, they need to create a stronger government, and eventually the first 5 presidents will do okay, operating under this new constitution. So when we're looking at the data here, we can use the STAR items and they can be very eye-opening and very beneficial for informing our instruction. So for the next few minutes, we're going to discuss a few STAR items. Now on this slide, you're going to notice it's a family of SCs. And if you look at the knowledge and skill statement, this particular knowledge and skill statement covers 2 eras, the Revolutionary era as well as the Constitutional era. As a cluster, these students, they do, it depends on how they're feeling, I guess, because they're all over the place here. But as you can see, they test 8.4A every single year. So you can be sure that there is going to be a question for 8.4A. Following close behind is 8.4C. What I would like for us to take a look at today on your participant guide is 8.4A. This past administration, the students experienced a SCR for this question. And 16% of our students were able to respond correctly. So if you will go ahead, if you want to, it's shown on the screen. If you will go ahead and take a look at this question and think about what is it that the students needed to know in order to be able to successfully answer this question. Please come off mute and share ways you can ensure that if your students have a question like this coming year, how are you going to ensure that they can answer this question successfully?
Probably the Stamp Act. They know what that is. Paying taxes on stamp. They know that infuriated the colonies. And probably the proclamation of 1763, because a lot of them felt like, they fought, but then I can't even go west, and get into that good old fertile soil. So I know mine would know those first 2 for sure.
Okay.
Right now, by the time the test come, hopefully they'll know more. But the first 2,
Right.
they can just tell you that in the back of their hand.
Well, continue to spiral. We're going to talk about that as well. 8.4a is loaded with information. It is all of the causes of the American Revolution. They need to be familiar with all of them. So last year, only 16% of our students were able to get those 2 points. So this is what the rubric looked like. If the students were able to elaborate on what Ms. Hawkins just mentioned, they got the 2 points because, let me go back. They had to choose 2 in order to get the 2 points. Now, when I looked at this rubric, what stood out to me was taxes had to be paid in silver. When I was in the classroom, I never talked about that. Do y'all talk about that? So I would inform my instruction by now adding this to, what I'm teaching. One more caveat to put in my toolkit when I'm talking about the STEM Act. Any other observations or comments? Sabrina? I'm calling on our ILC because she's out there in the field with me. She's boots on the ground.
I knew she was gonna do that. I was ready for you. So one, students need to be able to articulate why each one of these are a cause. And that's what you can see here. It's not just saying it was a tax on paper. It was a tax on paper and they couldn't pay it. That led to the rebellion. Even though that's not the only answer, and I don't think these are the only answers that they had to have, it's the rationale based on what they're saying, but it was a tax on paper and they had to pay it. And for some of them, it was difficult. Representation, right? If they would have said it was a tax on paper and it was a tax that they weren't represented in government to have passed, they still would have got the points for it because you would have actually been telling about 2 of them and it would have been telling how they caused the revolution. But kids have to be able to articulate and then write. Remember, we see it, we hear it, we say it, we write it. So students have to be going through that. So that's where the QSSA really does help, or any type of discourse and then writing will help students because they cannot just be able to identify and bubble in ABCD anymore. We need to make sure that all of those high leverage things, at least, that they can write and respond to the question. What was it? How was it a call?
And these were just the items on the rubric that they were, given credit for. So, but they could have said, as long as it was true, they would have gotten credit. Now, this question surprised me. It's from the Early Republic. It's 8.14b. And it surprised me because 42% of our students got this correct. They remembered this from 6th grade because I don't think we necessarily talk about supply and demand in grade 8, right? But this was a question that they encountered last year. So once again, take a look at this question and tell me what you think. How do you think your students would do this year if they had this question? Mr. Rudd?
I'm reading it now.
Okay.
When you're asking what would they need to know?
Mm-hmm. What would your students need to know? You not knowing what's on the test, but you know that you've prepared your students to respond to these SCRs. How are you going to prepare your students to respond to these questions? A question like this.
Well, first, the free enterprise system, knowing exactly what that is. Isn't this Yes, I would probably say first, just knowing what free enterprise system is, and then just being able to kind of map out like how with the price of wheat, I guess just maybe mapping out like pricing, like when you're dealing with I don't know. Well, right now I just got free enterprise system. I'll let someone else take that.
Okay, someone else
So
take the
Brandon, you
lead.
want to jump in and take that?
Did he just call on me? I do not work for you, sir. No, no. Students will, first of all, they have to have inferencing skills. So we have to really work on inferencing, because if I have inferencing skills and I know the characteristics of a free enterprise, supply and demand, right? And what happens If I have inferencing skills, I could look at this and say, okay, in 1816, there was volcanoes. It changes the weather. New England experienced a summer with, so basically it didn't have a summer, that's the title, and crops failed. And when it asked me about wheat, we're going to be talking about wheat. I may have not thought anything about wheat, but I can infer based on what I've been given and based on what I know that when there's no warm weather, we can't grow crops. And so if I can infer that, I could say, based on free enterprise, they still gonna need wheat, but the supply is low. What happens when the supply is low? Demand is still there. Demand is high, supply is low. And so then that is going to lead them to the answers. If they cannot infer, even if it's not something that you have taught explicitly, if you have taught them to infer and you've taught them the basics of the concept free enterprise, they should be able to answer the question. Now, this was a difficult one, but we know now to be better prepared and to actually teach them the content through the skill. So when teaching free enterprise, give them scenarios of supply and demand and situations that they can make inferences from that drive supply and demand so that they can understand, or different parts of free enterprise so that they can understand what it does.
Right.
The
And so
question still
this,
sucks though.
yeah, it does. This is the rubric. So they, like she said, they had to know, they had to infer, they had to be able to understand supply and demand. By the way, supply and demand, that the way it's explained here is not in our TEAG specificity. I will add it because it needs to be added. I will add it. I will add it. Yes, anytime I study the test so I can add to the TEAG specificity. I'm helping inform your instruction as well. That's what I do. All right.
Can I add something real quick?
Mm-hmm.
So I know I'm at Stag and PG, and so my kids, they struggle with keeping their mouths shut after tests. They always want to like ask me about things, and I remember them saying, "What was this the year without the sun?" And they're panicking. But once they released the test and I took a look at it, I know our students did pretty well because I had them in 7th grade for Texas studies. And in Texas studies, it is important to go over economic concepts and the boom bust and supply and demand. And especially when you get to the Great Depression. So I think this is an example of how important that like vertical alignment is in social studies. So after seeing this question, I made an a point to meet with my 6th and 7th grade partners
Say that
to
for the people in
ensure.
the back.
Yeah,
Yep.
just because like, everything does connect and these are basic social studies concepts. So even if we don't have direct explicit standards and we don't think that we need to explicitly teach these things, they're still going to be expected or they're going to assume that they know these things. And I think this is like a huge example of that and how important vertical alignment is.
You are so correct. I was just going to actually speak to that. Yes, please, please, please get that vertical alignment in place on your campus because your 6th and 7th grade teachers can make your lives so much easier because obviously 42% of these students, they remembered that information from 6th and 7th grade. So good job.
And I just want to add one more thing. This is evidence of, if you guys recall, like the legislation, they were trying to rewrite our standards, and those standards were going to align 6th, 7th, and 8th grade to align with the ELAR standards, right? And this is, we haven't historically seen a lot of alignments between 6th, 7th, and 8th grade of skills questions on 8th grade tests, but you can tell that they're about to start pushing for it because we're starting to see more and more of this. And I think we saw like one question was just wrong, but they were reaching. And then this one was it was a vertical alignment question with a concept that would come from 8th grade. And so
Right.
we
And
just
in
need to start to prepare for that.
Right. And in my PLCs on demand for 6th grade, I'm showing them what types of questions that show up in 8th grade. So they'll have an idea of of how to teach it as well. Real quick, because our time is running out. Know the rubric. Know the rubric. On your participant guide, I have linked the social studies rubric for you. Know that they must answer the question completely. For example, to get the 2 points, it's 2 points. It's based on how they answer the question completely. There are no points for conventions, so they can spell however, as long as the reader can make out what they were trying to say. It would be nice if they could spell. Also, read samples. There are samples available on TEA, and I have also linked those samples on your participant guide. And then lastly, have a plan, such as ACE. Now, I do want to talk about ACE because they are very familiar with this from their ELAR class. However, for social studies, they do not need to be cute and restate the question. They need to answer what is being asked and provide the evidence. Explain it. It needs to be relevant. So they just need to basically answer the question completely to get the points. Okay, and when they write in your classroom, when they write those 2 to 3 sentences, give them feedback. Give them relevant, give them accurate, and give them specific feedback. I'm not saying that they have to write an essay. If they can walk in your class and you ask them, tell me about the stamp act, they should be able to tell you about the stamp act. And make sure in your feedback that you're telling them, yes, this is relevant because you were accurate because yes, this is specific. You would get the point or you would get 1 point, but begin to help them see the importance of writing their activities. I mean, their complete answers. There's a lot of noise around me, y'all. I'm trying. All right, I do want to say one more thing about the data. When we look back at 4D, 4D was just a straightforward question about the Great Compromise. They did well. Let me go back. I want to show y'all something. On 4D, last year, they did well. It was about the 3/5 compromise. Last year, they tested the Great Compromise. And I'm not sure if they really understand the large state, small state argument in the 2 houses. Obviously, when you go back, went from 63 to 43 just because of the content that was tested. So let's make sure that they understand those 2 compromises equally.
I would like to go back to the question stem. The real issue lies in the fact that in order to answer this question, they had to read this question stem, which sometimes when people teach the 3/5 compromise and the Great Compromise, you don't take it to the Constitution. Remember, all of the standards, if you read the overarching standard, is going to say as it is in the Constitution. So in 8.15D, we take it to the Constitution, where you also, this is from the Constitution, it is still a part of the principles, right? So they should be able to go back when you teach Great Compromise and say the structure of government is 2 houses, like literally draw the 2 houses. It's reshaping it from 1 house to 2 houses. And then you have a Senate and a House of Representatives, and then label that. But if they don't read this quote, they can't connect this quote to the Great Compromise. So this was a primary source question, and historically, all of our primary source questions doubled down to be the lowest tested questions that we have, and they did need to read the question in order, the standard in the excerpt in order for them to be able to answer. They could have answered the question just by seeing Great Compromise in large small states, but if they also read this and made a connection, they wouldn't have ran from it. Most of them probably ran from the question because there was an excerpt on there.
The lessons that for Unit 3, you're going to find that the Constitution is used extensively. Excerpts from the Constitution are used extensively. Therefore, the students will be familiar with how the principles are reflected in the Constitution, as well as the Federalist Papers. There's a lot of primary sources, little bitty snippets to help get them making those connections. Any other comments or concerns about this, I would implore you to please use and look at these questions like Ms. Pimple said. She looks at the test questions and inform your instruction. I am working on updating the TEAC specs. Anytime I see something that's new, I'm going to go in and add it. Okay, so for this one, I just wanted to show you that for 17A, which is from the Early Republic, 43% of our students were able to get this question correctly. I'm not going to take up time saying it's your turn to answer those 3 questions, but please take this back to your PLCs. And when you look at these test questions, ask yourself those 3 questions that are on the participant guide. What skills and content do my students need to know? And what are going to be your moves? What misconceptions may they have? And then what are going to be your teacher moves to ensure those misconceptions are thrown out and that they know that they know that they know. This was a 2-part question, and it is on your participant guide. Because it's a 2-part question, I did not create a snippet of it. But do you feel like you can apply the historical STAR data to inform your instruction? Okay. Also, we're going to look at ways to spiral. The DOLs on the lesson, they intentionally spiral. So when you open up the DOLs, there's always going to be questions from previous lessons, trying to keep that content in front of the students so that it doesn't grow old. Another way to spiral is to stop and ask questions as you facilitate your lessons. Spiral checks for understanding. And of course, these can always be entry and exit tickets. Keep that old content in their face continually. Always, you can spiral within a quarter. So for example, within Q1, they learned about the founding documents, and then those founding ideas were challenged during the American Revolution. And then in Q1, you have George Washington, for example, people and grievances that show up in Q2. Because in Q2, those founding documents and ideas are now going to become addressed. Those grievances will be addressed in Q2. You can bring George Washington forward. Make sure they know that he was the general and then he was the chairman of the Constitution. And now he becomes the first president. They may have a list of characteristics wanting to know, who is this? They would know that this is George Washington. And again, the grievances listed in the Declaration of Independence, bring it forward to Q2. Let them know that these grievances are now going to be addressed in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. You can just keep ideas spiraling within a quarter and across quarters. So when you review along the way, you spiral to mastery. I want to show you this chart. So when you introduce some information, your kids get it 100%. They all just heard it. They leave your class, and if they never get it until the 5th review, like if you never mention it again, then they don't even remember 50% of it. But if you review along the way, in between, their retention goes up to almost 90%. That's why I'm helping you out. I'm bringing those questions back in those DOLs. I'm keeping it fresh on their mind. Any comments or questions about this graphic? Okay, I can spiral and connect standards introducing Q1 to Q2. So I wanted to start talking about the instructional implications. I know all of you are familiar with the lessons that are in Curriculum Central, correct? Okay, so now I'm opening myself up to hear what you think about these lessons. Could I get some feedback, please?
I think for us over here at Medrano, a lot of the lessons are very reading heavy.
Okay.
So it's really hard we're talking about engagement and focus for a 90-minute class. And sometimes the reading element is, it has to be broken up and changed or altered because I can't keep the kids reading this 5-page document, especially if half the class is EB. So it's that part is tough. It's good info, but it's tough.
Are there really 5 pages of reading in some of those lessons?
I mean, sometimes there's a lot. I mean, when you're
Not
doing
5 like consecutively, but 5 things to read within a lesson? Is that what you're saying? Like not
well, yeah,
5
like
pa
we do like the 13 colonies in one lesson, there's a lot of content to go over. Even though it's broken up with some like questions,
Mhm.
to the kids, they just see 5 pages. They don't see that as a broken up instruction. So we've had to kind of find ways to present it and cut it down a little bit just because of the EB learners on campus. It's a lot for them. So that's just
Okay.
that I notice that what we're going through here.
Okay, thank you for that feedback. Anyone else?
This is Mr. McNair at San Wesley Homes as well. I'd like to piggyback off of that. It can be intimidating to the kids.
Okay.
So we've had to piece it out, add some of your other enrichments in there, so it's not overwhelming to the kids. It's in some of the old English that's in the content, especially when you start reading the Declaration and those writings. It's words that they've never seen, never heard before, so it can be intimidating. So we try to add in pictures, some other um, tools to help them correlate with what's being said. So
Okay.
and that takes time.
Okay.
So we have to consider that with timing and pacing as well.
Okay. So from last year to this year, is instruction more focused, or you feel like it's not? Because last year you guys just had resources. This year we've taken those resources and put them in a lesson.
Hi, it's Miss Martinez from EB Comstock.
Hmm.
Um, I was gonna say I really enjoy the lessons, and I know at our school also we do incorporate Loman, but for the most part, I'm loving all the connections that you do it for warm ups and all the cool engagement things that are on there. Because I know for my kids in the school I'm at, that's exactly what they need. Because one, they're not motivated to work, period. So making those real life connections during warm up, getting them engaged from the minute the bell rings, and doing all those cool engagement activities. Like when I read that breakup letter, they went crazy for it. And they really also loved all those Declaration of Independence excerpts, using that glossary to, translate those words to words they do know. So that was really cool.
Okay, thank you for the feedback, ladies and gentlemen. I am taking it very seriously. So maybe next year I can put maybe a tiered reading along with those readings. Okay. All right, but I do want to make sure that we're all familiar with what's here, and I want to give y'all an opportunity to fill out the feedback and fill out the attendance. And I will send this presentation to everyone. But of course, every lesson has the bundle standards, the planning resources, the engagement strategy, and then of course the lessons are linked. Miss Green, our ILC, talks about this a lot in the PLCs on demand, breaking down your SEs. It is very important, if you know that you are going to struggle with how you want to present a certain SE to your students, break it down. I'm not saying you have to break down every single SE, but if you know there's a SE that you want, in breaking it down, it may give you some ideas and some more content for yourself to ensure that that SE is fully unpacked. And so this sheet, she talks about it in her PLCs on demand. And this is what one would look like, for example, for 6.A. Always start with the knowledge and skills statement. It sets your context and your time period. This is about westward expansion, and the kids need to know the effects of westward expansion. And the verb, they would need to be able to explain what? The Northwest Ordinance, its principles and procedures. What specific content? This comes from the TEAC specificity or the field guides. And then of course, you go to Lead Forward and you get that IQ tool and you look at the STAR items, and then you can see how it's been tested and ensure you know what the students need to know and what skills they will possibly need to successfully answer these questions. And then what content could possibly be inferred in a test question? Well, the Northwest Ordinance was part of the Articles of Confederation. It was considered a strength. So this sheet can be very, very helpful. I want to put a plug in for Miss Sabrina Green. She has done an excellent job providing PLCs on demand for every topic. She has started on Q2. How many of you have viewed these PLCs on demand? Raise your hand. If you have not, shame on you. Download them and look at them. They're really, really good. Really helpful. And so
And I'll be sending out a survey asking you for your feedback too, also, okay?
And I will be sending a survey out about the lessons. Please be honest, true, so that we can continue to get it right for you and your students. Because our time is like nearing, when I send you this presentation, if you have a new teacher that, that just needs some guidance, this will just take them through what the templates offer and the purpose of the learning objectives. For example, the engage and connect portion. Why we have new learning. This is where you introduce any new content and any skills that they're going to need to move forward into the guided learning. There are stamp-its along the way right there for you to ask, to formulate questions. So in that teacher column, when you get to the stamp-it portion, formulate questions to ensure that they have gotten what they need at that point in the lesson. Then, of course, there's the guided practice I just mentioned, which leads to their independent practice, which is an opportunity for them to create meaning for themselves. And then finally, the DOL. And most DOLs have an SCR. If we can ever get All in Learning to cooperate correctly, I will begin to put a sample of what the student answer should be for the SCRs. So there's a way for me to link a PDF. I did it for the performance assessment because I realized that the T items did not have an answer key. So that answer key is in there with the performance assessment, and hopefully we can work the bugs out. I just think the system is overloaded because all of Dallas ISD is using All in Learning, and they have become one of my favorite people. I can implement instructional practices that will increase student mastery.